My stepfather changed the locks the day after my mom's funeral. He didn't know she had already given me one final envelope. The morning after my mother's funeral, I drove to the house I'd grown up in to collect a few family photos she'd promised were mine. Instead of finding the front door unlocked like it had been my entire life, I found brand new locks and a moving truck parked in the driveway. My stepfather, Greg, walked outside carrying a box of my mother's clothes and calmly told me I wasn't welcome anymore. Before I could even speak, he set the box on the porch and said, "Everything in this house belongs to me now." Then he closed the door in my face. I stood there for almost 10 minutes trying to understand what had just happened. Mom and Greg had been married for 12 years. We were never especially close, but we'd always been civil. During Mom's illness, I visited every evening after work, cooked meals, drove her to appointments, and stayed overnight whenever Greg claimed he was too exhausted. She never once hinted that he planned to cut me out of her life after she was gone. The hardest part wasn't losing access to the house. It was feeling like I'd somehow lost my mother all over again. Over the next week, Greg ignored every phone call and refused to let me inside, even to collect old photo albums and the jewelry Mom inherited from my grandmother. When my aunt tried speaking to him, he told her my mother had wanted a clean break between her old family and her new one. That sounded nothing like the woman who called me every morning, just to ask if I'd eaten breakfast. Still, people started believing him, because grief has a strange way of making even unbelievable stories seem possible. A few days later, my mother's best friend, Diane, asked me to meet her for coffee. She looked nervous the moment I sat down. Without saying much, she reached into her purse and placed a large sealed envelope on the table. Written across the front in my mother's handwriting were the words, "Open only after I'm gone." Diane explained Mom had given it to her almost 6 months earlier, saying she wanted someone she trusted to keep it safe, no matter what happened after her death. Inside the envelope was a handwritten letter, copies of several legal documents, and a small flash drive. Mom wrote that she'd become worried after Greg started making strange comments about starting over once she was gone. She admitted she'd quietly met with her attorney and updated several documents without telling him. The flash drive contained scanned copies of family heirlooms, insurance records, and most importantly, a detailed inventory of everything she'd personally owned before marrying Greg. She ended the letter with one sentence that brought tears to my eyes. "Some people mistake kindness for weakness. Don't let anyone erase our family's history." My attorney reviewed everything and immediately contacted Greg's lawyer. It turned out Greg had been claiming nearly all of my mother's personal property belonged to him, including items she'd owned decades before they met. The inventory, purchase receipts, and photographs on the flash drive proved otherwise. Even better, Mom had recorded serial numbers for several pieces of jewelry and listed exactly where they'd been stored in the house. She'd anticipated this fight long before anyone else realized it was coming. When mediation began, Greg acted completely confident. He insisted I was trying to take advantage of a grieving widower, and even accused Diane of helping me fabricate documents. Then my attorney produced the originals. The handwriting was verified. The dates matched the attorney's records. The scanned files on the flash drive matched documents already stored in my mother's lawyer's office. One by one, Greg's arguments fell apart until there was nothing left to say. A few weeks later, I was finally allowed back into the house to collect everything that legally belonged to my mother. Walking through those rooms without her was harder than I expected. The kitchen still smelled faintly like the cinnamon rolls she baked every Christmas morning. Her reading glasses were still sitting beside her favorite chair. I packed the photo albums, my grandmother's jewelry, and one old recipe box she'd written in for nearly 30 years. Those things weren't valuable because of money. They were valuable because they carried pieces of her life. Before I left, I found one final note tucked inside the recipe box. It simply read, "Home isn't a building. It's the people who make you feel loved inside it." I smiled through the tears because, for the first time since losing her, I realized she hadn't left me with a house. She'd left me something far more important. The certainty that love can outlast bitterness, as long as someone chooses to protect it. Would you have fought for your mother's belongings or walked away to avoid more pain? Yes or no?